The air feels thick, heavy, like dust motes caught in a single beam of light slicing through the tension. He stands there in the center of the living room, the room we painted together, the room where we argued about the color of the trim and laughed until we cried watching old movies on the floor. His shadow stretches long and menacing across the rug we picked out on our first anniversary. His voice is low, measured, devoid of warmth, a sound I barely recognize anymore. It lands like a physical blow, rattling the quiet. "This is my house now," he says. It's not a question. It's a statement. A declaration of war in the place we built our peace. My breath catches. The world outside the windows, the world I thought was ours, seems to tilt. My hands are clammy. My heart pounds a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The silence that follows his words is deafening, filled only by the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. This can't be happening. Not here. Not like this. But the cold certainty in his eyes tells me it is. The dream is shattering. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. We met in a coffee shop that smelled like old books and possibility. He was charm and laughter, easy smiles, and a shared love for rain on window panes. I was drawn to his apparent stability, the way he talked about building a future, not just dreaming about one. My own life had felt a little untethered, despite the comfort my family's legacy provided, a legacy tied, in ways I hadn't fully appreciated, to the very ground beneath our feet. He spoke of wanting a home, a place to plant roots, and it resonated deep within me. I saw a partner, a foundation. We dated, fell in love, built a life. And then we found the land. It was perfect. Rolling hills, ancient oaks, a small creek whispering at the boundary. It felt sacred, like it had been waiting for us. He was excited about the house, the design, the physical act of building. I loved the land itself, the history I felt humming beneath the soil, the quiet power it held. We poured everything into building that house. Our savings, our weekends, our dreams. Every nail, every board, every coat of paint felt like a promise. He handled the contractors, the budgets, the practicalities. I focused on the feel of the place, the way the light fell, the plants we'd put in, the life we'd live within its walls. It was our joint creation, or so I believed. The cracks started subtly. Little shifts I initially dismissed. Late nights that turned into early mornings with vague explanations. A new phone he was suddenly very protective of. Money that seemed to vanish from our joint account faster than usual, attributed to business expenses I didn't understand. His temper, always mild, began to fray around the edges. He'd snap at small things, his eyes holding a hardness I'd never seen. The laughter grew less frequent, replaced by a simmering tension that permeated the very air we breathed inside our beautiful, hand-built home. The house itself began to feel different, no longer a sanctuary, but a stage where an unknown play was unfolding, and I didn't have a script. Then came the day he said the words. That moment frozen in my memory, the dust motes dancing in the sunbeam, his cold, possessive gaze. This is my house now. The shock was absolute. My mind reeled, trying to process the audacity, the cruelty. How could he? How could he erase our history, our shared effort, our love, with a single sentence? I stumbled over my words, trying to understand. What did he mean? What had changed? He laid it out, cool and precise, like a surgeon cutting away something unwanted. He claimed he had paid for everything. The materials, the labor, the permits. He had managed the construction. Therefore, he argued, the house, the structure on the land, was his alone. Our marriage, our partnership, apparently counted for nothing in this calculation. He informed me, with chilling calm, that he wanted me out. He was keeping the house. He was keeping everything. He talked about my investment, my asset, reducing our home, our life, to line items on a ledger. He looked at me as if I were a trespasser, an obstacle to be removed from his property. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just about the house. It was a complete negation of me, of US, of everything we had built together. The air felt thin, suffocating. My world was collapsing around me, and the foundation it was built on was shaking violently. My initial reaction was disbelief, then a desperate scramble to reason with him. I reminded him of our shared dreams, the promises, the love. I spoke of our work, our money combined, the future we had planned. He just looked at me, his face a mask of indifference I had never seen before. It was like talking to a stranger wearing my husband's face. He calmly presented documents, invoices, bank statements, things I'd seen but never scrutinized, all listed under his name or business accounts. He had meticulously structured things, it seemed from the beginning, to paint this picture of sole ownership. He had been planning this, planning to take the house, to take my life, and leave me with nothing. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, leaving me breathless and dizzy. He hadn't just fallen out of love. He had orchestrated a betrayal of monumental scale. I tried calling friends, but the shame, the utter humiliation, choked off the words. How could I explain that the man I married, the man I built a home with, was trying to steal that home from me, claiming it was never mine? I felt isolated, exposed, standing alone in the wreckage of my life. The house, once filled with warmth and light, now felt cold and cavernous, each room echoing with his cruel words. I walked through it, touching the walls, the furniture, memories swirling around me like ghosts. This chair where we sat reading, this kitchen where we cooked together, this bedroom where we planned our future. Each object, each corner, was now a reminder of the lie. The air in the house grew heavy with unspoken accusations, with the weight of his betrayal. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind raced, trapped in a loop of how and why every interaction with him was a minefield. He became increasingly dismissive, treating me like a lodger who had overstayed her welcome. He controlled the thermostat, the internet, even the groceries. He made it clear, in a million small ways, that I was no longer welcome, that I was a problem he intended to solve by making my life unbearable. The house became a prison, its beautiful walls closing in on me. I felt a desperate need to escape. But where would I go? He had effectively made me homeless in the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary. The legal battles seemed insurmountable. His documentation looked solid, at least to my untrained eye. Friends offered spare rooms, but the thought of leaving felt like admitting defeat, surrendering the ground I stood on, the life I had built, to his ruthless ambition. The house felt like it was sucking the air out of my lungs, each breath a struggle against the weight of his control, his cold, calculated cruelty. I felt myself shrinking, disappearing within the walls of the place that was supposed to hold me safe. He began bringing in a lawyer, a sharp, cold woman who looked at me as if I were a nuisance, an unfortunate detail in a business transaction. They would have hushed conversations in the living room, his voice low and confident, hers crisp and professional. I would overhear snippets: eviction, asset division, minimal settlement. They talked about me as if I weren't there, as if I were an object to be moved. The dehumanization was complete. I was no longer his wife, his partner, the woman he claimed to love. I was just a problem to be efficiently removed. He started changing the locks, giving me a key with a pointed look, a reminder that my access was now conditional, granted by him. He turned off my phone service, claiming I was running up bills. He blocked my access to joint accounts, leaving me with limited funds and a growing sense of panic. He seemed to revel in his power, his control. A cruel smile would flicker across his face when he saw the fear in my eyes. He was systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece, using the house as the central weapon. I felt trapped, helpless, watching my world crumble around me, unable to stop him. The walls seemed to mock me, the beautiful floors now feeling like a cage. He was tightening the noose, slowly, deliberately, and I saw no way out. The despair was a physical weight, heavy in my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Every corner I turned in the house was a reminder of his presence, his control, his ultimate goal, to erase me from this space entirely. The thought of facing him, of fighting him, felt utterly overwhelming. He had built a fortress of lies and legal maneuvering, and I was standing outside, unarmed and vulnerable. I felt a crushing sense of defeat settling over me. One particularly bleak afternoon, sitting alone in the empty quiet of the kitchen, staring out at the land I loved, the memory surfaced. Not just the land, but how it came into my possession. My grandmother. Her foresight, her quiet wisdom. She hadn't just given me the land. She had placed it in a specific kind of trust. A trust designed to protect assets, to ensure they remained in the family. A trust one hadn't thought much about since the initial setup, years ago, when building the house seemed like the only important thing. The details were hazy, buried under layers of married life and shared responsibilities. But a word, a phrase, something my grandmother's lawyer had said, flickered in my memory. Land ownership, separate entity. Protection from what? From exactly this, perhaps. The realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. The house might be built with his money, managed by him, but it sat on my land. Land owned not just by me, but by a trust, a legal entity designed for its protection. It wasn't just my land. It was land with a history, a legal structure, a purpose beyond just being ground to build on. The feeling wasn't immediate triumph. It was a cold, quiet dawning, a shift from utter despair to a sliver of possibility. My mind, dulled by fear and grief, began to whir. The trust. The lawyers involved. The paperwork I had filed away, forgotten. Could this change things? Could the land, the silent partner in our home, be the key? The thought was fragile, tentative, but it was the first breath of hope I had taken in weeks. I felt a shift deep within me. The victim collapsed and the kitchen chair began to stir. A new kind of energy, cold and focused, started to replace the fear. He thought he had covered every angle. He thought he had planned the perfect takeover. But he knew nothing about the land. Nothing about my grandmother's legacy. Nothing about the trust. And in that ignorance, I saw a path. A narrow, difficult path, but a path nonetheless. The game wasn't over. It had just changed entirely. The air in the kitchen no longer felt suffocating. It felt charged with a new, dangerous energy. The crisis deepened as his confidence soared. He became bolder, more aggressive. He spoke openly about his plans for the house, renovations, maybe selling part of the land he didn't know wasn't his to recoup costs. He acted as though I were already gone, talking about my belongings in boxes, planning out which rooms he would repurpose. He even started bringing his new associate to the house, a woman, sleek and confident, who looked at me with a pitying, superior smile. Seeing her in my home, walking through the rooms we built together, was a fresh wave of agony. It solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about property anymore, it was about dignity, about justice. He was parading his victory, his new life, in the ruins of mine, inside the walls of the home I had loved. He had served me with formal papers, eviction notice, divorce petition, all drafted by his sharp, cold lawyer. The language was clinical, brutal. It stripped away every last vestige of our shared life, reducing me to a legal obstacle. The deadlines were tight. He expected me to fold, to disappear quietly. His lawyer sent emails filled with legal jargon and veiled threats. The pressure was immense. I felt the weight of the legal system pressing down on me, cold and impersonal. I was facing not just my husband's betrayal, but the might of his financial resources and legal team. It felt like a giant wave about to crash over me, sweeping me away completely. The despair returned in waves, threatening to drown me. Doubts crept in. Was the trust enough? Could it really protect me from this? What if I had misunderstood? What if his lawyers found a loophole? The nights were the worst, lying awake in the bed we once shared, listening to the sounds of the house settling, each creak and groan a reminder of the precariousness of my position. I felt utterly alone, a small boat tossed on a stormy sea, the shore receding into the mist. The house, beautiful in the daylight, became a place of shadows and fear after dark. But the memory of the trust, the knowledge of the land's true ownership, was a small ember glowing in the darkness. It was the single solid thing I had left. He had planned for everything except the ground beneath his feet. He had built his castle on sand he didn't know was owned by someone else. And that someone else was me, protected by layers of legal history he hadn't bothered to uncover. I made the call. It was a cold, clear morning. My hands trembled as I dialed the number for the trustee, the lawyer who had handled my grandmother's affairs for decades. Explaining the situation felt surreal, like narrating a bad movie. He listened patiently, his voice calm and steady. When I mentioned the specific trust, the one my grandmother had established for the land, there was a pause. Then a shift in his tone. He remembered. He had the documentation. And yes, he confirmed, the land was held in trust. It was not simply owned by me individually. It was an asset within the trust, governed by its specific terms. Terms designed, in large part, to preserve the land for future generations, to prevent it from being easily sold or claimed outside the family line. He explained the implications in careful, legal terms. The structure on the land was one thing. The land itself was another entirely. And the trust held significant power over what could happen on that land. It was a powerful shield. A shield I hadn't known I possessed, or had forgotten I did. Making the decision wasn't easy. It meant revealing a part of my family history, a financial reality I had kept private, even from him. It felt like unleashing a force I didn't fully understand. But the alternative was losing everything, being left to drift, watching him live his new life in my old home. The choice became stark: fight with the full force of the land's legacy behind me, or surrender to his calculated cruelty. The fear was still there, a knot in my stomach, but it was now mingled with a growing sense of righteous anger and a cold, determined resolve. He thought he had cornered me. He thought he had won. He had no idea that the very ground he stood on was my silent, powerful ally. The turning point wasn't a dramatic moment. It was a quiet, internal hardening. The decision was made in the stillness of the house, the silence no longer oppressive, but filled with the hum of a plan taking shape. I would not just survive. I would reclaim what was mine, using the strength he never knew I possessed. I began gathering my own documents, organizing the information the trustee sent. The house, once a prison, now felt like a staging ground. I moved through its rooms with a new purpose, a quiet intensity. He saw my silence, my apparent passivity, and interpreted it as defeat. He was wrong. I was preparing for the moment I would reveal the truth. The day came. He had scheduled a meeting, his lawyer present, ostensibly to finalize the terms of my departure. They sat across the polished surface of the dining room table, the table where we had shared countless meals, countless stories. His lawyer was poised, a thin smile playing on her lips. He looked smug, confident, already anticipating the end of this troublesome inconvenience. The air was thick with his perceived victory. He started talking, detailing the logistics of my moving out, the financial settlement he was offering, a pittance, barely enough to rent a small apartment for a few months. He spoke with a detached air, as if discussing a business transaction that had gone slightly awry, but was now being efficiently resolved. His lawyer nodded, adding points about legal fees and timelines. They were a united front, projecting an aura of unassailable power.
He sat quietly, listening.
My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs, but I focused on keeping my breathing even, my face expressionless. I let them finish. Let them lay out their terms, their assumptions, their certainty of winning. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not filled with my fear, but with a coiled tension, a readiness. I took a deep breath. My voice, when it came, was steady, calm, cooler than I expected. "There's something you both seem to have overlooked," I said. He frowned slightly, annoyance flickering in his eyes. His lawyer maintained her polite, but impatient, smile. "And what would that be?" he asked, his tone condescending. I reached into my bag, pulling out a slim file folder. I placed it on the table, sliding it towards his lawyer. I didn't look at him. I kept my gaze fixed on the woman who had been so confident in dismantling my life. The land, I said. The land this house is built on. His lawyer picked up the folder, a look of mild curiosity on her face. She opened it, her eyes scanning the documents. The first few seconds, her expression remained neutral. Then, a flicker of surprise. She turned a page. Her brow furrowed. She turned another. Her body language shifted, becoming rigid. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of intense concentration, then disbelief. I watched her face as the realization dawned. The trust agreement. The documentation of ownership. The legal structure that had been in place for decades, long before she or he had ever arrived on this land. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked up, not at me, but at him. Her expression was unreadable, but the shift was palpable. The air in the room thickened again, but this time, it was his confidence that was being suffocated. He saw the change in his lawyer's demeanor. His smug expression faltered. "What is it?" he demanded, his voice sharper. "What does she mean, the land?" His lawyer didn't answer him immediately. She kept reading, her eyes darting across the page, absorbing the legal implications. She looked at the dates, the names, the specific clauses of the trust. She understood. She understood exactly what this meant. Finally, she looked at him, a grim set to her jaw. "The land," she said, her voice low, "is not individually owned by her. It's held in a family trust." He stared at her, then at me, his eyes darting back and forth, trying to grasp the meaning. He had always assumed the land was simply hers, an informal detail in the background of his grand plan to claim the house. He hadn't considered the legal entity, the trust, the specific terms that governed the very ground beneath his feet. "So what?" he scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "She still owns it. It's the same thing." His lawyer shook her head slowly. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It's not the same thing. The trust has specific restrictions. It's designed to keep the land within the family. It controls what can be done on the property, including selling it or dividing it. Building a structure was permitted, of course, but the ownership of the land remains with a trust." She paused, looking at him with a professional, yet devastatingly clear, expression. "What this means," she continued, "is that while you may have a claim on the structure, the house itself, you have absolutely no claim on the land it occupies. And under the terms of this trust, the trust has significant leverage. It can demand rent for the use of the land. It can dictate terms for the house's presence here. In essence, the house is sitting on land you do not own and cannot own, under the terms of this trust." He went pale. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen. His eyes were wide, staring at me, then at his lawyer, then at the file on the table. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He looked completely blindsided. His meticulously crafted plan, his assumption of ownership, the very foundation of his claim, had just been dissolved by a piece of paper, a legal structure he knew nothing about. The land, silent and overlooked, had spoken.
"You
never told me about a trust," he stammered, his voice weak, accusatory. "You never asked about the land," I replied, my voice still calm, but with an edge of steel I didn't know I possessed. "You only ever cared about the house, about the structure you were building. You assumed, and you were wrong." His lawyer cleared her throat. "Given the circumstances," she said, her tone now markedly different, "your claim on the property is significantly weaker than we initially assessed. The trust complicates everything. They could, for example, charge you ground rent retroactive to the day the house was completed. They could potentially demand the removal of the structure if terms aren't met, though that's extreme.
But the point is, you don't control the land."
She, or rather, the trust on her behalf, does." He slumped back in his chair, defeated. All the bluster, all the confidence, drained away, leaving behind a man stripped of his power, exposed as a schemer whose own ignorance had undone him. He had been so focused on building his asset, his claim, on manipulating the immediate reality, that he had ignored the deeper truth of the ground beneath him. He had tried to steal the future, but he hadn't accounted for the past, for the quiet strength of a legacy he didn't even know existed. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of his shock, his utter defeat. He had walked in expecting to finalize my eviction, to claim what he believed was his. He was leaving with nothing but the cold realization that he had built his empire on borrowed land he could never possess. The confrontation ended quickly after that. His lawyer, clearly frustrated and perhaps a little embarrassed, advised him to reconsider his position. He couldn't fight the trust. He couldn't claim land he didn't own and couldn't buy. His leverage was gone. The house, his supposed great asset, was now a complication, a liability sitting on land controlled by a separate, unassailable legal entity. He left that day, defeated and silent, his dreams of sole ownership shattered. The house felt different instantly. The heavy air lifted. The walls no longer felt like a cage, but like the boundaries of my own space, my own ground. The victory was not jubilant. It was quiet, layered with the pain of what had been lost, the marriage, the trust, the shared dream that had turned into a nightmare. I had won the battle for the house, for the land, but the war had left scars. Walking through the rooms in the days that followed felt like reclaiming territory. Each step was deliberate, a reaffirmation of my presence, my right to be there. The dust motes still danced in the light, but they no longer felt oppressive. They felt like witnesses to the quiet revolution that had taken place. The house was mine again, in a way it never truly had been before. It wasn't just a structure. It was connected to the land, to my grandmother's legacy, to a deeper sense of belonging that transcended legal documents and greedy claims. The divorce was finalized, thankfully, without further major battles over the house. His claim had evaporated in the face of the trust. He got a settlement, less than he would have demanded, but enough to start over somewhere else. He never apologized. He never acknowledged the depth of his betrayal. He simply disappeared from my life, taking his cold calculations and his shattered arrogance with him. The house remains. It stands on the land, solid and real. It is no longer just a building. It is a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of hidden strength, to the unexpected ways the past can protect the future. It's my house, yes, but it's also the land's house, held in trust, rooted in history. The dry humor comes in the quiet moments, shaking my head at the sheer irony of it all. He wanted the house so badly, only to lose everything because he forgot to look down, to check the ground beneath his feet. The emotional closure is a complex thing. There is relief, certainly, a profound sense of safety I hadn't realized I'd lost until I got it back. There is satisfaction, a cold, quiet vindication in seeing his arrogance crumble. But there is also a lingering sadness, a mourning for the man I thought he was, for the future we were supposed to build here, on this land. The house holds both the echoes of laughter and the ghosts of betrayal. It is a place of complex memories, of lessons learned the hard way. I walk the land now with a deeper understanding, a profound connection to the soil, to the trees, to the creek that whispers its secrets at the edge of the property. This land, protected by a grandmother's love and foresight, became my shield. It reminds me that true security isn't just in the structures we build or the assets we accumulate, but in the deeper roots, the history, the unseen foundations that hold us up when everything else falls apart. It's a bittersweet victory, a hard-won peace. The house is quiet now, but it feels full. Full of history, of resilience, of the quiet strength of the earth itself. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.